the lure of power. Everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. The truth comes first, reasons come last, but we're always and constantly learning, because we stop learning, we stop teaching. We at least stop teaching well. We don't want to do that. Listen, the struggle for succession of the king. Looking at the book of 1 Kings opens with the struggle of the successor of the king of Israel. Verse 1 tells us that King David did what? He was so old, he was advanced in years, he was an old guy, unable to get warm. I used to visit Grandma in Florida, and she was well in her 80s by this time. My wife and I, we'd sleep out on the pull-out couch, and Grandma kept the air conditioning at a nice, cool, crisp 84. That's a Florida 84, a little bit of humidity in there. I'd turn it down to be 78. That's still hot. A couple hours later, Grandma would get up in the middle of the night. She'd say, notice it was cold. She'd put it back to 84. Why? Because in her older years, she had poor circulation. That happens to all of us. So the poor circulation amounts to the body growing colder more easily and quickly. So the bottom line is that such an issue with King David that those attending to him brought him what? They called the young lady by the name of Abishag. She was a Shunammite. She was a very beautiful lady who lay with David to keep him warm. So I want to make clear, verse 5 makes very, very clear that David knew her not. In other words, she was there to keep David warm, no physical relations. I think he was too old for that anyways. David's condition left him as the king to be really in no condition to effectively rule the kingdom any longer. And as a result, King David's failure to enact a succession plan sooner than later, up to this point, almost caused the death of Solomon, and in that David's other son, Adonijah, tried to take the kingdom by deception and force. But Scripture tells us that Adonijah exalted who? Himself. We know that's bad in Scripture, saying, I will be king, and he prepared himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. You read about that in verse 3. Now, he did this without speaking to David in an effort to take advantage of David's old age, a form of what we might be considered, elder abuse in today's world. Now, had he succeeded, he would have had Solomon, the rightful successor of the throne, probably killed. He would have, in order to squelch any legal challenge to the throne. Now, once again, the sin of the people wanting a handsome, charismatic leader. Isn't that funny? We've covered that here before with Saul and other leaders. As human beings, we just like good-looking, charismatic people who sound good, even though they rule us really poorly. And now I want to pause here to point out that Adonijah was a handsome man. Verse 6. This goes back to, again, previous episode where I addressed the fact that humans, including God's people, tend to want or to be drawn to, often demand, handsome, good-looking, charismatic, statesman-like leaders over character and those who speak the truth and make good decisions. We see that in today's world, don't we, in this election process, 2024. That being said, let's move on. In a nutshell, in an effort to claim the throne for himself, Adonijah sacrificed sheep, held a feast to proclaim himself king among many of the kingdom's officials, and he would have gotten away with it had he not been for Nathan, the faithful prophet, and Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. What happened is that Nathan and Bathsheba met with King David to inform him of Adonijah's actions to take the throne by force, and this resulted in David instructing them to go out and take the following action, which is they took a counteraction. While Adonijah was holding his feast, many of the king's officials were there, all vying for nice little positions, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites went down and had Solomon ride on King David's mule, which is the way you announce being the king, and brought him up to Gihon. Then Zadok the priest took the horn from the oil from the tent and anointed Solomon king. Then they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, Long live the King Solomon. All the people went up after him, playing on the pipes, rejoicing with great joy, so that the earth was split by the noise. In other words, it was really loud. 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 38 to 40. But oh, the boy, I tell you, man, we all know when we're caught and done wrong. People know they've sinned and that they've been caught. So as a result of being caught, verse 49 tells us what happens next. And that says this, Then all the guests of Adonijah trembled and rose. Yeah, they were caught, and each went kind of his own way, kind of doop. Hopefully nobody sees me. So why did they do this? Because those associated with Adonijah would be considered co-conspirators. They were caught red-handed playing politics in an effort to gain favor and or favorable positions within his cabinet or within his government as successors to the kingdom, and being illegally, unethically, take the throne by force. They didn't care. They just wanted those positions. They knew that they had sinned, and if they caught, very well may cost them their own life, and certainly, if not their own life, their freedom. So they quietly dismissed themselves in an effort to fall back in line with Solomon and rightfully abandoned Adonijah as a false king. So what happened to Adonijah? Well, verse 51 tells us that he himself trembled. He himself trembled, and he feared Solomon. So what did he do? He ran back, he arose, grabbed the horns of the altar, verse 51, which you can't, not supposed to kill anybody if they're inside the temple holding the horn. So Adonijah went to the altar, took hold of the horns as a legal claim to protection, which was not automatically granted otherwise. Exodus 21:14, which explains what that's all about, and 1 Kings chapter 2, 28 to 34. But David allowed Adonijah to let go of the horns, and he allowed him to come out without being killed, at least for the moment. And this ends chapter 1, or 1 of 1 Kings. And the point of today's episode is to highlight how far people will go to amass or maintain their power. It's a human sin to use power, to try to get it wrongfully, to use it wrongfully for one's personal gain, which is temporal, an eternal, spectrum of things. You're only here for a little while. It's good to have power. It's good to have money. You got to use it rightfully. Be a blessing to others. All right? That's what we're called to do. Conclusion, it's important to note the birth order to assume the throne in that Amnon and Absalom, David's first and third sons, experienced violent deaths. So that's how they got to the birth order they were at now. That Chileab, his second son, apparently died at an early age. Adonijah, the oldest surviving son, may have assumed what he thought would inherit it in terms of the crown, even though Solomon had been designated for that spot as successor. Because remember, Bathsheba had gotten with David and made that happen. That often happens. The oldest feels like, I'm next in line. How did I get bumped out of the position? You could understand his feeling, but to take it forcefully or illegally that way, or manipulate it, I guess that's human sin. Read about that in chapter 1, verse 13 and then 17. Adonijah evidently knew of the intended royal succession, which didn't include him, so he deliberately avoided trying to do that the right way and do it his way. Verses 8 to 10 and 10. Adonijah thus exalted himself against God's will to become the number one guy, most powerful position in the kingdom, to be the king over the nation. So in summary, verses 9 to 10 makes clear that as a prelude to taking over the throne, Adonijah held a feast, but he failed. All right? He failed to invite Nathan and Solomon. That would have been the legitimate way, and he probably wouldn't have succeeded anyway, so that's why he didn't invite him. And he apparently was planning to kill them, for had he been allowed to, they had been allowed to join him in the feast and eat together, Adonijah would have been, according to their culture, legally obligated to protect them. So as such, they would have posed an ongoing challenge to his position as king. So this illustrates vividly just another biblical story of what people will do to obtain and maintain their power and their wealth, I should say. So as we have seen, sinful humans will steal, cheat, lie, and even commit murder to obtain and maintain their power and all the perks that comes with that. Look at Washington, D.C. right now. For what? For a few years of temporal power? Look at these leaders in their 80s. They're still clinging to the power. So when they go into the presence of God, they'll still be trying to cling to the power, but it won't be there. They'll be naked before God, and they'll go, oh, man, maybe I should have chose differently. Because they lived their life, how? Against God's will. Most likely, knowing that they hurt many other people in the temporal, but not for eternity. And so most likely, it's going to land them, I think in many cases, sadly, in hell as opposed to heaven for eternity. So what people will do for temporal pleasure and power is short-sighted. And as such, we as followers of God through Jesus Christ should inventory how we are living our lives daily in an effort to avoid the pitfalls of falling into such temptations in our own lives. This is not just a story about kings, presidents, or leaders. It's a story about you and I as parents, managers, community leaders, and the list goes on. We should be careful to act rightly, fairly, and biblically at our job, how we treat our family members, how we treat others, how we use our inheritance from our parents, right? Make it fair, even. And other resources. God knows all, sees all, deals with all. Nobody, even the earthly kings, don't get away with evil and sin. Not in the long run. Neither will we. So the great news is that we can lead rightly whenever God calls us to the moral, ethical, and biblical direction that he wants us to do and elevates us up. And this is the great news and the hope that we have in our temporal time here on this earth that we call life. and how we, you and I, can use what God's given us in terms of power, influence, and affluence as God leads us and lends us temporarily the blink of an eye before we go on to his presence and leave this clay body. That's all I got to say today. That's our instruction, a challenge, but great news because we can use things to God's glory. That's right. We can exalt other people. We can look for the best in other people. We can encourage other people. We can take our wealth and our affluence and our influence. We can help other people, especially other believers, even to the non-believer. Let's help them make a great witness for Jesus Christ. That's what I say. In the marketplace, that is key. You want to witness? Go ahead and do that. That's going to speak more than anything else. Good place to start. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you do a couple things. Hey, listen, we live in a challenging world. The world's a little bit upside down right now. So I want to challenge you to go out and get equipped. You can do that at equippedacademy.com. There's online courses and other resources. So before you go, make sure you do a few things. Share this with your friends. Like this, and to make sure you subscribe. Bam! Gonzalo Sinistros, Italian right hook. Knock out that subscribe button. We'll see you at the next video. I'm your host, Steve Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.